So I'd like to thank everybody for coming. This is the youth workshop that we're going to be going over apprenticeship and how youth can be involved in our state's registered apprenticeship. What are some of the best practices? What are some of the things we've learned? This is going to be a panel type workshop. It's very low key. There won't be PowerPoints. We're just going to hear from our three panelists on some of the things that they've learned throughout their every day-to-day work in this space. And then we're going to turn it over to you guys and let you guys get the questions that you have answered. So we really want this to be an open, informal workshop. We want you guys to feel comfortable. You can put your feet up, but maybe don't fall asleep because that's too comfortable, and then I get in trouble for putting you guys to sleep. So I will introduce our panelists briefly, and then they'll go into a little bit more detail about themselves. We have Mr. John Page, who will be the only one I have to do this to wrap it up. He's the CTE Director for Tacoma Public School District. We have Bree Durham. She is the Director of Youth Apprenticeship with the AJAC, that's Aerospace Joint Apprenticeship Committee. And then we have the lovely Josie Bryan, and I say lovely because we work together, so if I do that, she's a lot easier for me. She's our Youth Employment Specialist at Labor and Industries. So take it away, John. He'll be our first one.
Oh my gosh, I'm going to take it away here, huh?
Your time.
Well, hey, welcome to Tacoma. My name is John Page. I have the privilege of serving as the Director for Career and Technical Education for Tacoma Public Schools. Oh, what would I say? I'm looking at this audience after lunchtime. Let's see, a context for having a conversation. I would probably house some words. I'd house words like internship, pre-apprenticeship, youth apprenticeship, and apprenticeship. So this conversation today is about youth apprenticeship. So it'd be people under the age of 18. So we're talking about 16, 17-year-olds. We're talking about registered apprenticeship, okay? And so those terms get confused often in different arenas. And I think that's part of the miscommunications that's out there about apprenticeship. So I do want to be clear on it. An internship has a tremendous amount of value to it. An internship could be paid or unpaid, but that's not what we're talking about today, okay? Internships, another way they vary is typically a student will complete some coursework or complete an application, and then a school district or a college will place a person to get some shadowing or awareness, and it might lead to employment. Okay, and then pre-apprenticeship, registered pre-apprenticeship, is where a person is typically unpaid. Some of them can be paid a stipend, but a pre-apprenticeship is really experiencing several different trades under one umbrella. It's not getting specialized, but kind of more of an awareness piece, okay? And if you get into apprenticeship, whether it be registered youth apprenticeship or registered the adult apprenticeship, those begin with a job, a paid employment. That's really an important distinction because families, K-12, we are so used to placing people. To get a job, you've got to convince an employer that you're a value add and you're going to make the employer money. That's a total mind shift in what we do, at least in K-12 education. It's not converting Spanish to English. They're two different distinct type of programs with different outcomes. So I don't know, I can tell you a little bit about our journey. I'm still learning quite a bit. I think that anybody sitting in this room today, if you've been to any other conference or if you're here for the keynote speaker, I think you're already sold on apprenticeship. I was sold on apprenticeship 30 years ago, 40 years ago. But I ran into challenges on the barriers of how to get people into apprenticeships. It's really easy to say, you can go to college, you go to university, or you can do an apprenticeship, or you can join the Army. But to actually apply and compete for those positions, I just found myself in an area of frustration when I was trying to help people in this community access apprenticeships. And I mean no slam. If there's apprenticeship coordinators in the audience, I apologize. That was my own experience, okay? And then as I look at other data about the average apprentice in the state of Washington, you know, somewhere it's between 28 years of age or 32 years of age. You probably know there's about 258 registered apprenticeships in the state of Washington. About 20 of them are craft trades. And so it's kind of like that gap, those gap years from the time a person leaves high school until they're 30 years old, meandering out in the desert or whatever. Is there any way that public education could help close that gap? And so that was a motivator for me. And so you kind of found, well, I kind of found out, I think I know something about this. There's explicit, there's implicit, and there's other handshakes that might be barriers to how a person accesses the adult apprenticeship. And they can be anywhere from mandatory drug testing to transportation to lots of other factors involved. It could be competition for the math score, where kids coming out of high school at age 18 are competing with somebody that has a bachelor's in mathematics to become an electrician. That's a pretty tall order to try to compete against that. So it's how do you get smarter at doing this work? That was a motivator for me. So I also think about what the keynote speaker was saying about his experience on the farm, learning all these on-the-job skills, whether it be welding or repairing equipment or feeding a cow or whatever. If you look at at least in the urban hub here, our kids are not going to be exposed to those experiences on their family farm here in the urban setting of Tacoma. So it's like a lot of people, I think, like construction trades, will leave high school and they'll go work residential construction, for example. And they'll learn how to frame, they'll learn some form setting, concrete, rafters, yada, yada, yada. But that's all non-union, not apprenticeship work. The time they hit 28, 29, 30, now they have a skill set and they have a documented work history that they're going to show up to work and make money for the business. So those people, when they're 28, 29, they can compete for that carpenter's apprenticeship. Now, I'm not saying that's everybody's pathway, but I think I see some patterns there. So what I see the value of youth apprenticeship, registered youth apprenticeship, the value is you can have a comprehensive training program. 16 to 17-year-olds, after it's been referenced out with Josie Bryan's office, can do things in the work setting that they could not do without being a registered, could not do legally without being a registered youth apprentice. That's the motivation for it. So I could take out and show you 16-year-old kids working side by side in the AJAC program with designers, engineers, and machinists that they'll wow you. They really know what they're doing, and they're on a pathway leading to the adult machinist program. What we strive to do in Tacoma is how do we expand apprenticeship beyond production technician, which is in the manufacturing end. So we worked, I have to credit Spokane School District. They were the first school district to become a youth apprenticeship sponsor. They did it about 5 years ago. It was with Prep Cook. And so in Tacoma, we looked at our existing pathways, our existing teachers, and our programs, and we did a simple SWOT analysis, looking at your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats. And we said probably the low-hanging fruit, if we want to expand this, would be Prep Cook, because we have culinary arts in all 5 of our comprehensive high schools. We figured probably cabinet production assembler, because we have 5 wood shops still. And then we also looked at auto service technician. So we got those 3 approved with a lot of help from people in LNI, Brittany being one of them. But what we did is we looked at what's the gold standard. We're not looking for alternatives to graduation or alternatives to college. What's the gold standard? So Titus Will Ford, Titus Will is the largest dealership organization in the state of Washington for cars. They are the gold standard. And their service department wants to hire our students to become their next generation of technicians. For culinary arts, if you're from out of town, the Pacific Grill is down here on Pacific Avenue. That's the gold standard. It's where our Chamber of Commerce meets monthly. They want to hire our kids in their kitchen to work alongside their chef. And then the third one was IDX, which is production assembly or cabinet assembler. And they're an international. If you've been to Macy's or any of the stores at the mall, you'll see their storefronts made out of wood. So we looked at what would be the gold standard partnerships, not looking at what would be convenient, but who would be the gold standard that when a kid put it on their resume down the road as they become adults, that it would be recognized. So that's where we started. I don't know. I probably wrote a couple notes. I got just a minute or two left. I would say it's really important to use those terminology, like say them out loud, related supplemental instruction. So in youth apprenticeship, it's 144 hours over the course of 2 years. But I think sometimes in the public sector, we use all those acronyms. RSI will tend to lose a lot of people, which will contribute to misinformation out there. If you're coming out of K-12, the good news is you don't have to do this work by yourself. LNI has regional consultants that are experts. They're SMEs, subject matter experts, with their own systems. So they have their own forms, and they'll help you set up your committee, your apprenticeship committee. Something we ran into, I have to back up. I mean, I'll talk a year off, obviously, but, where it kind of started, I think, is that there's so much perception. Employers are just used to saying, if they're not, no, the word no, because if they're under 18. If you're manufacturing, if you're doing anything in heavy industry, it's just been the standard has been age 18 or we'll see you when you turn 18. And that's what's inspiring about youth apprenticeship. Again, 16, 17-year-olds. So it's how do you get to yes with that? They need to hear it. Josie and I were talking a little bit on break, is the face-to-face relationship. Most employers are not going to respond to an email saying, yes, you can hire 16, 17-year-olds. They really need to be assured. The first two questions for me, at least, the employer, was first, what can they do? What can the kids do? And the second question is it legal? Because they've been told through generations with child labor laws in the United States that you can't do anything unless you're 18. So these are not workarounds. These are approved by the state's agencies. And like I'd say with any group here, if not now, when? I'm nearing kind of closing my career. I got a few years left, but it's kind of like a window that has presented itself that I could have only dreamed of 25, 30 years ago. Right now in the state of Washington, you have Governor Jay Inslee. That is advocating for apprenticeships, okay? And so he's publicly saying 100,000 apprentices in the next 10 years. And so what's happening is the different meetings, he's got staff listening to the meetings, he's sending people out, he's directing resources, and OSPI is following with grant monies. Our organization, if you're not in K-12, the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction is our state agency for K-12. So when you've got that momentum, if you have any inclination to jump onto youth apprenticeship, now's the window. And I'll tell you something else. Josie Bryan, as good as she is, there's only one of her in the state of Washington. Now, last year she finally got some help. I think she's an office of 2 now. So if you're going to get involved, now's the time to do it before you end up at the back of the line, because other districts are grabbing on really quick. Part of the journey, I'd say it's most of it's up here. It's how much risk do you want to take and allowing yourself to not be perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect to roll it out. And it is a total learning journey. I would share with anybody, I'm no expert in it. An expert by definition is somebody who's made a heck of a lot of mistakes in one area. So if you're willing to become an expert, you don't have to be one to sit in this room right now, but if you're willing to ask the questions and find out things they don't go perfect, but take the risk. I think that's really important. What else would I say in there? I've got to hand this mic off. I hate doing that. One of the big ones that we learned this year, it's kind of a little bit embarrassing. I know Bree knows all this stuff, but these young kids here, minor work permits sound really simple. And I think for small business owners, they are really simple. It's really on the licensing side. It's whatever their business license has. It's really a endorsement of their business license. It's really simple in a small business. But when you start working with larger corporations, people say, well, you send that to that department and that department. It's a little bit. So I'd say early on is they have to have a minor work permit. You'd want to just help along. You'll become an expert. And it's really simple stuff, but in K-12, we've never had to work with this before. It's new learning for us. But none of this stuff is really heavy lifting. Where we're going, I'll say just a couple more things, is the part about not being perfect is people put a lot of work in this, and we want our kids to be successful. I think we have to give ourselves permission that not every kid is going to finish. Just like college, not every adult finishes. We heard the speaker say, 50% of the people that start college don't finish. Just like adult apprenticeship, life things happen. So I don't think anybody's gonna bat 100%. And I'm totally okay with that. What we're trying to do in Tacoma now is strengthen a mentoring program. We've looked at several different models. We're looking at the one that's called Mentorship Matters. It was developed out of Canada, but we'd look to customize it for Tacoma. What we're looking at doing is staffing a little bit more with career coaches or job coaches. You'll hear me say this, I do not refer to them as case managers. None of our kids are cases, and most human beings don't like to be managed. And there's connotations that case management often means somebody's been in trouble with the penal system or something has to be checked up on. So I think the words are really important in anything that we do. It's just like 21st century leadership skills. A lot of people refer to those as soft skills. I just don't. I think it's really incumbent upon us to call them leadership skills or essential skills, because we have to teach them explicitly. We have to use the little bit of time we have with the students with a lot of intentionality, the little bit of time we have, and not be laissez-faire in what we're trying to do. All of us around the table here, we believe that those essential leadership skills are essential to everything we do in this project. So that's about it for me. I better just hand this off right now before I get myself in trouble. I would say just go for it. just roll. If you believe in the speakers, if you believe that apprenticeship is important, if you believe that paid employment is important, and if you believe that people, adults and students, tend to learn more on the job than they do in the classroom, then roll. What would you have to ask yourself that? I'll hand this off, but I'll tell you what, the taxpayers paid a lot of money for us to come to this room here today. It was a great lunch. But if we do nothing about it, then why did we come here? So I would say go roll, allow yourself permission to not be perfect.
Hi, guys. My name is Durham again. I'm from AJAC. We started down this journey of youth apprenticeship, and it has definitely been a ride. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the journey and how we kind of landed on where we're at. But basically what happened is we do employer roundtables as an apprenticeship to just make sure, because our industry, specifically in manufacturing, changes so fast. The technology, the needs of the employers are constantly changing, and so we're always trying to make sure that our adult apprentices are getting the best training possible and that we're aligned with industry needs and goals. And so typically on a quarterly basis, we have employer roundtables where they tell us all sorts of things. In the last 4 to 5 years at these roundtables, they have just started aggressively kind of banging on our door and saying, hey, we're becoming more increasingly concerned about the skills gap. We want more connection with K through 12 and the CTE system, and we want to get these kids onto our shop floors and into our doors, but we don't really have a ton of time to do all the different events that the schools want us to do, but we want to have more of a partnership or more of a role in what that looks like. And then we need a pipeline of workers that are motivated, they're inspired, and they're excited to work in manufacturing. How do we foster that with the younger generation? And so those were all really big concerns that they had. So at the time, we decided to convene a bunch of employers, talk about those needs, and kind of start dreaming about what we could do with the youth on the shop floor and what would be something that we could support. And so we kind of looked at all the different tasks that a 16 and 17-year-old could do with the help of Josie consulting with us on what we could and couldn't do on the shop floor. We were able to kind of come up with what we call a production technician, which is a good skill set in and of its own right that a lot of manufacturers have as good jobs that you can stay in and get really great exposure. And then it also gets students a great rotation to make informed choices at the end of this experience to either go into machining or industrial maintenance or plastics process technician, or a lot of different ways. I have some people that are going into engineering, a different host of reasons. So we had some champion employers that were willing to kind of take the plunge with us in Tacoma Public Schools when we first started our last year, our first cohort. And so what was great about that is we were able to really collaborate with Josie and make sure that we got really crystal clear on what the kids could and couldn't touch. We spent the time to really understand what the regulations were. And I think a lot of us, our gut reaction is like, oh, they can't do that till they're 18. And I think we've just heard that mantra so much that that's just a norm. But this interesting part about it is as we started doing work with Josie about, asking a lot of the questions that employers had, we found a lot more open doors than closed doors, and a lot of places where we could collaborate because we were setting up a program that had one-on-one mentorship. It had that RSI, or that classroom theory piece anchored in it, and it had that structured rotation. So it's an intentional program with that mentorship that makes it a program that she was willing to talk to us about what kind of things that we could do to get these kids that exposure we really wanted. And so that was a really great partnership. So that was kind of how this all started to form. And once we figured out all those different pieces and we were able to go towards our committee, get that approval from them to go forward and then ask for council's blessing, and we were able to get it. And then from there, we worked with Tacoma Public Schools, and really in the beginning we didn't all really know what this was going to look like and what kind of kids we really needed to go after and identify, and we all had a lot of different theories on that. But so we had 19 students that we partnered with, and West Valley also kind of took the plunge on this thing to because we wanted another school on the other side of the mountain to kind of just test this theory out too. And so we learned a lot in year one. About what kind of kids that we need to kind of go after, what kind of kind of pathways we need to build within our school partners and things like that. Now we're in 13 different school districts, and we have 56 active youth apprentices with 36 employers that have signed on. And there's 2 staff people, so if I look tired, usually half the time I am. But, you know, a lot of the work is really just quelling a lot of fears within employers. And then all this work, whatever industry you do this in or decide to do this in or are contemplating to do this in, the biggest part that I've found in doing this for the last few years is that it's all about trust and partnerships and building those relationships. And asking all those questions and not being afraid to ask questions to great partners like LNI and to Teamwork is Safety and your school partnerships. Because once those things start working, it's surprising the amount of collaboration that you can do. And then to the employer's point of it, the more of that collaboration that you do, the more trust that they've built up in us. And so in year 2, you can see that we've rapidly increased. We were at 12 employers last year, now we're at 36. So they're building trust in that system, right? And we've been really intentional about building that and making sure that their feedback is valid and valued when they do give us that time. So that is kind of how we were able to set up what we're doing today. And the average age of our apprentices is 32. And so we did ask a lot of questions even to those apprentices that they were coming into the door, like, why are you here? How did you, what brought you to our doorstep? Like, why are you doing apprenticeship now? And a lot of it was, well, I've been just wandering around for a long time, and now I have a family, and I need to get serious about a job that I know that will get me to where I need to be, and that an employer will invest in me, and I can get this wage that I need. So, and I really didn't, know what I wanted to do. I'm a hands-on learner, and so, we were really kind of pushed to figure all that type of stuff out. So, how many of you guys are from the educational side of the room? Raise your hand. Okay. And then how many of you guys are from the apprenticeship side of the room? Raise your hand. Okay, cool. Just wanted to know kind of audience I was talking to. But for those that aren't in apprenticeship, about 93% of this type of training is on the job, and that is a huge flip. To, I know, the K through 12 system. 7% of that is that theory, what we call RSI, or classroom time, right? And what I spend a lot of time talking with people about is that really that RSI piece is that fundamental theory that supports that apprentice on the job. That's what you want that time to be, so they can be the best apprentice they can be on that field. And, our machinists can't always stop sometimes and talk about Pythagorean theorem or, logic tables and how to do feeds and speeds, right? So that type of stuff is what we really encapsulate in on that RSI, or that classroom time. And so that's really, really important, so that the mentor can really focus on that high-level skill attainment on the shop floor, and they're not constantly stopping to do those fundamental conversations. And then we're also working to get parents to understand what the value of this is, or what the ROI is for students. That's just not widely talked about right now. But honestly, when you're able to play it out, parents are stoked that this is an opportunity. But I think there's been such weird, there's just the messaging in apprenticeship. My grandpa was an apprentice, and the messaging wasn't all that great. Now it's better. It's so much better. And so you have to kind of reinvigorate the culture to get them to understand what apprenticeship's all about. My brother went into apprenticeship. My family's has a long, and he makes better money than I do, and has no debt. It's amazing. So, I think kids are also really willing to have these conversations because they see the writing on the wall. But it's just really knowing how to sell that. So, also, the last point I want to add is that what I've found is the maturity of these students. I think we kind of do the whole millennial thing. Oh, they're a bunch of babies and all this different stuff. And, the funny thing is that these kids are really talented. They just interpret the world of work a little bit differently. And the funny thing is I fully believe, and there's a lot of research to support that soft skills are best attained on the job. It's that exposure. It's that, understanding that in that adult setting, kids kind of grow up. And we've seen that through our apprentices. Night and day, they are different people than when they came in the door. And I'm so proud of them. So I do think they'll rise to the occasion, but we just have to risk them being exposed to the work that, the world of work that we're used to, and expect that they're going to rise to that bar. And then they have in every sense of the way in what we've seen at Ajax. So Yeah, that's what I have to say. So, yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Josie Bryan. I'm the Youth Employment Specialist for the state of Washington. Pretty much my role for my unit is to ensure the safety, health, and welfare of our youth in the state. Also to set and enforce standards, and also consult, educate, and train employers, you know, it could be parents, any public. Yeah, so that's my role for LNI, working with all kinds of the legalities of, like Bree mentioned, what they can or can't do. First of all, in the state of Washington, the legal age to work is 14, but we are talking about 16 and 17-year-olds in a paid registered apprenticeship or a paid work site or work-based learning, which applies to schools, educators. So pretty much the simple things that employers need to have when they hire a youth, which would be in this case, a minor work permit, which you could apply with the Department of Revenue Business License Service. Those applications get kicked over to LNI, to my unit. We review them and to see if the teen is allowed to perform those duties. If not, we normally call the employer for more explanation. Is there something else they can do? But in this case, when we work with the minor work permits, we pretty much view all that they put on the paper. Also, with the part of the paperwork that is also necessary is the parent school authorization, which is a form the employer fills out, and then the teen signs it, then it goes to the parent or legal guardian to sign off, and then the school gets it. And then eventually it goes back to the employer to keep on file. So you're treating these youth as employees, just like anybody else. The third part is you need to keep a proof of ID, proof of age. It can be their driver's license, it can be a birth certificate, it can be a passport. Those are just examples. Pretty much those are the three things you're going to need in the state to hire a teen, okay? Now, with that being said, after now that John and Bree spoke of these youth production technicians and other registered apprenticeships that are going on, there is a variance exemption that is allowed for teens, 16, 17-year-olds to perform. And I'll give you an example of what this variance would cover in different occupations. For example, teens, 16, 17-year-olds would be able to use power-driven woodworking machines, power-driven metal forming, punching, shearing equipment, meat packing, processing, food slicers, like for those that are in the culinary arts, that would fall under that. Power-driven balers, compactors, paper pressing machines, roofing operations, power-driven circular saws, band saws, chainsaws, guillotine shears, wood chippers, and abrasive cutting discs, along with excavation jobs. So pretty much if the occupation fits this variance, these are the only ones that you can get an exemption on, then there is an application you fill out. Along with that, you must submit a list of the equipment or tools, power tools and equipment that the teen is going to be trained on. What I need to do with that list is to check them out to make sure it would be in compliance, and also with the federal. Yeah, they have their hazardous orders for youth also. So I have to be careful to check their books also to make sure it would be fine to give a variance. Did you have a question?
Yeah, so under that variance then, what impact does that have? Because effectively the youth is an employee. So what effect does that have on the L&I insurance rate?
That's a good question. I don't know if Bree can describe more about that. I don't work in that unit, so I honestly can't.
I'll take that one.
Okay, great, John.
I'll take that one because that was I think we had more educators ask that question than owners. And what it comes down to is the classification of the job and the history of incidents within that classification with that business. That's where the insurance rates are placed, not by their age is not part of the equation.
But if it's considered a training program then, in the context of an apprenticeship or a pre-apprenticeship, could be considered a training, there's a training rate for L&I. Then I'm seeing you shaking your head. So
Yeah, no, I mean, they're like our apprentices are paid employees of that employer, so they will fall under the just like an adult would. They would fall under any sort of insurance that adults would have for workers' comp and all that type of stuff. Then sometimes employers will have some sort of liability insurance or some other sort of things that they may, secondarily want to put on their business. And what I've found is a lot of employers are like, well, my insurer's telling me no. And I said, well, can you call them back and ask why? And then they're not, and exactly what we're trying to do, right? And then insurance companies will always say no because they don't want to say yes. I mean, it's risky. Every yes is risky in their world, right? But if they push back on that, then the insurance companies are like, oh, I guess we can do it. So what I've done to kind of expand our program is I have a couple employer champions that have been happy to call other employers interested in getting on board and saying this is how we navigated that private insurance piece, and this is how you should do it. Or there's a pitch like, use our insurance company. But, I mean, that's the kind of nice part of the privatized part of that part. So I hope.
I want to clarify your other answer regarding L&I. So I know that there is a training rate for L&I insurance. Is that not?
It doesn't apply to apprenticeship.
Nope.
Apprenticeship is a paid employee relationship. It's not like a brief training program. It's a full employee. You do not pay a higher rate just because they are a minor. You pay the same rate that you would across the board. And then L&I did just release an announcement that their workers' comp premium rates went down by 5%. And that's the biggest drop they've had in, I think, 10
years.
10 years. So
Yeah.
we are one of the only states in the country that does not charge you extra workers' comp based on the age of your employee.
Another thing to just say is that when the kids are in those RSI classes and they are a registered apprentice, those they are covered under L&I. So, huh?
As long as it's unpaid.
As long as it's unpaid. So yeah. So that's just kind of nice for the school districts and people that we and places that we partner. It's just extra coverage for the apprentice, which is nice. Just because I think both of the systems are sort of, housed under L&I, we get that benefit. So.
Okay, so what I wanted to do is finish. One of the most important parts that you need to understand is when the employer applies for this variance exemption to allow 16, 17-year-olds to work in hazardous work, it's very important that the employer understands that when the youth is operating the equipment, the hazardous equipment, that they are directly supervised while they're utilizing that equipment. It's there for them to learn the skills and not for production. Okay, like cut them loose and let them start making all these widgets while their mentor is off taking a break or something. That's not how this works. It's strictly an extension from the classroom where they're learning hands-on, like Bree explained, but they have to be supervised while they're operating the hazardous equipment or tools. So that's very important, yes.
So with a pre-apprenticeship program within a high school, as a trainer, can I train people to operate a forklift or a scissor lift
At the school district? Absolutely.
that are 16, 17 years old?
Yeah, and just so you know, you're actually regulated by the U.S. Department of Labor, not by the state.
Because there's not that employee to employer relationship, because it's not a paid apprenticeship, it's a pre-apprenticeship, it's a training. That's when Josie doesn't really get involved, because there isn't that employer to employee relationship. They're not accepting a wage. And then as a school district, you're a federal?
No, school institutions, universities are all regulated by the U.S. Department of Labor. That's it. Yeah.
Specific to forklift, of course, in the industry to operate it, you have to be 18 years old. On the training, what we do is forklift and flagger, both of those. The kids can take the training and take the assessment, and then we send them a birthday card on their 18th birthday to stop by the office and get their cards.
However, when you place your students with the employer and it's a paid position, yeah, that's an employee-employee relationship. So, yeah, you treat them just like an employee.
Yeah.
Are you all finished, Josie?
So in the variance that you talked about excavation. So has there been any talk with prevailing wage in regards to if we take one of these youth and put them out working with an excavation contractor or a prevailing wage job, of establishing a training wage? Or do they gotta be paid full journey scale?
That's a good question. That I'm not sure. I'm not in But what you said is when you put the kid on working in an excavation, you mean he's being trained to,
He's
Yeah.
asking about prevailing wages.
So prevailing wages, and I
Youth.
believe if you have to pay the youth the prevailing wage if they're on a prevailing wage job. My understanding with prevailing wage, and I am not a prevailing wage expert, but when it comes to prevailing wage, there is an apprentice prevailing wage that is set forth. And then one thing I would like to add is the minimum age to work as an apprentice in a construction trades, according to our WAC, is 17. Currently. So a 16-year-old cannot be an apprentice in a construction trades-based apprenticeship in the state of Washington. Can't be 16. They have to be 17.
Interesting.
So this will be the question and answer portion of our event, which we've already started. So thank you for kicking it off so generously. So please feel free to ask the questions of our panelists. You know, they're here to be a resource for you. So don't hold anything back. Let them have it. Let's get these questions that you guys came here to get answered.
Yeah.
Yes.
From a school district perspective, then, how are you assisting youth that are involved in an apprenticeship while they're still in high school? Navigating Core 24, making sure that their credits are attained. You know, talk about some of the dual credit options that you've been able to do and how you've been able to structure that.
I'll take a swing at that. Before I do on the prevailing wage piece, the youth apprenticeships that we're working under are not in conflict with union trades, okay? Okay, then I stand corrected. I'm not an expert in that area, okay? How do you navigate with, in the high school, with the apprenticeship? So the two models that we started with was, what's Chris's district? Central Valley, East Valley, West Valley. What they did is they started out with the RSI, the related supplemental instruction occurring during the school day, during their shop type classes. And I believe the students had early release for worksite learning. Okay, so there'd be students that are in good academic standing that could get signed out by their parents or by their counselors. So that's a single high school district. It's a pretty small district. In Tacoma, we took a different approach. We were really about access and opportunity and equity across the district. So if we housed it at one building, that would limit access. You know, if we housed it on the east side, it'd limit access from kids from the north, okay? So we chose to put a little bit more money into the pot. We run it after school supplemental instruction Tuesday nights for 4 hours. So it's open to kids from across the district. That's how we chose to do it. I'm not proud about anything. I guess I'm blessed to be able to say we have the first female youth apprentice in the state of Washington. We are proud of her. Her name's Raquel. That's the other thing is we don't call, what do you call a person when they finish 2,000 hours? We don't call them journeymen. We're wrestling with that. Right now we call them completers because journeyman means something in that arena. You know, that's a 4-year, $8,000 or 8,000 hour apprenticeship typically.
So the Core 24 question, I know you asked. So we have a couple different models. His is an after-school model. The kids get 15 college credits. Sometimes they get some work-based learning credits or things like that. And he wanted to do that for the access. In some other regions, we've partnered and done an in-school model where we've used parts of the Core Plus program to help get over that hurdle so that the students are checking some of those boxes, but they're able to release early their senior year in the mornings to be able to go to do this experience. But they'll come in usually like on a Monday morning, for instance, for 4 hours, do their RSI classes, along with other students that are in the program just to learn about manufacturing. They'll just do it together. And then those kids that chose apprenticeship will release, and they'll go to work in the mornings from like 7 to 11 or, you know, some sort of kind of variation there depending on the school district. And so that's how they get that piece done and still maintain that full class size that they're looking for that FTE. So we have a couple different frameworks. Every community is a little different how they work it. In Renton School District, the students release early. And kind of do a little bit of a combination. So there's ways to work around it. It just depends on how you want to build your frameworks and what kind of flexibility we can build in. So yeah. Okay, that covers
So regarding the hours, also Bree just reminded me when she was discussing that, is when your junior or seniors leave early, leave school early to go to work as an apprentice or work-based learning or work-site learning. Let's say they leave at, the school hours, school schedule is 8 to 3, let's just say. And every school building obviously is different schedule. If the teen leaves at noon, for example, and he leaves to go to work as an apprentice, and your school schedule ends at 3, those hours don't count as worked hours that we talk about, the allowable hours that teens can work. The clock starts for the employer once the school ends. So that actually gives them more hours for training.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
For John, just real quickly, I know you said for your program you did after school for your RSI, just to kind of get more equity between all the schools within your district. But I wanted to know if that impacted as far as transportation, because if they are coming from one side or the other, now they're coming to a centralized location, did the transportation cause an issue, or did you see a benefit as opposed to having it at each school?
Yeah, so transportation, I think, that's a really good question. I think all the way around, it's a challenge all the way around. You know, my generation, driver's ed, everybody took it their junior year or into their sophomore year, subsidized by the state. You know, now it's an expensive, if you're not a familiar, that very little driver's ed is even offered on campus of a school, even after hours. I think the cost is close to $1,000 to a family. So in our district, even in the good times of this economic upturn, we still serve a population that's about 60% below the federal poverty level. So transportation is an issue, but Tuesday nights, our class starts at 4 p.m. You know, school's in for kids at 2:35. So the kids that, here's something about apprenticeship. You got to really want to do it. And the kids that want to do it find a way. The kids that want to play football find a way. The kids that play volleyball find a way. You know, so sometimes it's ride shares. Is it a hardship? Yes. In manufacturing, they're going to have to find a way out to the business. So that's just in real transparency. We reckon transportation's a barrier not only in youth apprenticeship, it's a barrier in adult apprenticeships as well. I do wish I had a better answer for you, but that is an issue.
I would say like WIOA's got funding, the WDCs now have some funding to support some of these things. Sometimes we've advocated for bus cards from awesome, innovative CTE directors that are able to kind of use some resources there. And that's helped, but yeah, man, if we could get a driver's ed back, that would be huge, because a lot of kids, I've noticed their families can't financially get them through it. And so they'll wait till they're 18 just to take the test and do it that way. And so that we've seen has been a barrier, but we've leveraged WIOA funding for some of our students that are really in need, and that seems to help get some of those things figured out. So,
You know, I'll say something that I learned in this journey with manufacture in our area is a lot of the advanced manufacturing machine shops start much earlier and they finish their day earlier. And probably some of that's the traffic on I-5 to move their employees back and forth. So a typical first shift is over by 3:30. So if you think about kids doing worksite learning after school in manufacturing, that can be a challenge. I mean, it's kind of known the area. I mean, a lot of these shops, they run a second shift, but the people that are going to mentor and train apprentices are not on second shift. You know what I mean? It's a different management system. So it's something to think about. I think that's part of the journey. For K-12 is to get out of our classrooms and really go learn the industries. I'll say I'm as green as anybody else in that area. I don't know what I don't know.
Are there any more questions? So I have a question for you, Bree. How do you create a talent pipeline in K-12 to prepare students for this experience?
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to talk about as we've been kind of learning about the K through 12 system from the apprenticeship side of things is trying to figure out and really start working as an apprenticeship. We really started working with John and trying to understand what his teachers are doing, what his plan is for the career cluster that we're involved with, and really trying to take an active role in being a participant and trying to figure out how to help partner. with his teachers, with industry experts and things like that. And it really comes down, and then also, opening the doors and getting our employers to show, what they're doing and all that work, you really see that benefit pay off in youth apprenticeship and the attitudes the kids have towards these types of jobs now, that we're able to kind of get more people into that space. But yeah, it's really, really important, and I'm still trying to kind of crack the nut on how to get kids exposure to our industry and our profession and into that middle school range too, which is always a tough nut to crack. But we're trying to kind of figure out what that all looks like and how we can also kind of add to that conversation so that kids understand like what's in their local areas. I used to drive by all sorts of buildings and not know what they are, and they're so cool when you're getting inside those doors. But how do we keep that exposure and that momentum going? And so, yeah.
So, John, I have a question for you. Maybe this is one that Bree can handle too. You've said you've been a fan of apprenticeship for like 30, 40, 60 years. And how did you get, so teachers, a lot of teachers and educators, they came from a college system, a college education, they went into teaching more often than not. How did you get those teachers to change that mindset about apprenticeship and to get them to understand apprenticeship and actually what it is they're doing, when for so long teachers have been kind of, it's education and then the post-secondary option is college? How do you get your teachers to buy into this experience?
That's a great question. So we do offer externships where we pay teachers 30 to 40 hours in the summer to go out and join these businesses. Not all teachers will take us up on that, but we're building a coalition. I think also, we're kind of privileged in this room, you guys, to be sitting here to have this conversation. There's a lot of people that don't have the access. So what do we do with this when we go back? And so for us, we've set up arrangements with AJAC to take our career counselors, career guidance specialists out to actually walk the floors. A lot of people think about machine shops as the machine shops of World War II. Really dirty, heavy, loud, hot industries, looking at the whole difference in technology now and the level of math that's involved in these processes. We've also had administrator walks. Now, you start with one. I'd say if there's one person in this room, we wouldn't cancel the session. You start with whoever you have, and you build your leadership capacity. It's anybody that wants to listen. And the results come at different times. As when you were doing orientation last year. I mean, seriously, a parent came in with her middle schooler. This is for 16, 17, this is for high school kids, so that's kind of pretty cool, that parents are seeking out options for their kids. So the word gets out in so many different ways of how you build that coalition. But some of you may or may not know Willie Stuart. He's the first African-American administrator in Tacoma Public Schools, and he later went on to the school board. He's retired now, he's 83, 84. But I have to quote him because Mr. Stuart would say, if it's the right thing to do for kids, now's the right time to do it. And so that's my challenge to you is today, what will you take back? At the very least for today, I think we owe it to ourselves. Go onto the LNI website. Find out who your regional consultant is that can help you with apprenticeships. Call the person, email the person, invite them to your school districts. That's what you guys, here's the good news. The good news is it's December. You're perfect on timing for next year to roll this thing out, and for next year, the timing is perfect. So what can you get done this year? What can you get done today? And everybody can make one phone call or one email today.
Is that your mic drop?
I'm not saying another word.
He just said he ain't going to say another word, so I will take that challenge. So are there any more questions for our panelists? We're looking at about 4:05, and we've got technically another 10 minutes. I know some of you might be hitting the road. I don't want to keep you any longer than you need to. Again, I'm Brittany Craighead. I'm an apprenticeship consultant with LNI. If you have questions about who your regional consultant is, I can at least give you the name. I don't have all their numbers memorized, but I can tell you who they are, what they look like. We're all here today, so odds are I can try to track them down and at least make that introduction. We're here as a resource to help you guys in maybe looking at possible partnerships. One thing I said during the morning break session was you don't have to feel, especially if you're a rural school, you don't have to do this alone. Think of the other rural schools in your immediate area and see if you can partner together. Not everyone's going to be at Tacoma Public Schools with, you guys got 10 high schools? A little too much maybe? 10 high schools. not everybody's going to have that in a school district or going to have those resources and that funding available that they have, but there are ways out there, and there is assistance out there. You know, reach out to Bree and AJAC. You know, manufacturing might not be maybe what would be the best fit for your community, but they have amazing frameworks and a really good structure on how they did it and why they did the reasons and why they did it. So, thank you for coming to today's afternoon Youth Apprenticeship Workshop. I hope we got those questions that you guys had answered. If you have anything else, please feel free to approach the panel privately for any private conversations, maybe a little bit more detailed if you need be, but thank you guys for attending, and let's give our panel a great round of applause.
Nice job. It's been a pleasure to serve.
Yes, it's been fun.
These are your notes.